Let's talk tariffs, a word that sounds boring, a term often relegated to dry economics textbooks. But don't let the jargon fool you. But actually it means, the government just made your stuff more expensive. It's a direct hit to your wallet, a hidden tax that impacts everything from the gadgets you love to the groceries you need. Imagine buying a toaster from abroad, a sleek, efficient model you found online. At the border, a tariff slaps on a 25% fee. Suddenly, that bargain toaster isn't such a steal anymore. It's caught in the crosshairs of international trade policy. Suddenly your cheap toaster isn't so cheap. That initial excitement fades as you realize the final price tag is significantly higher than anticipated. The idea? What's the rationale behind this seemingly arbitrary price hike? Make you buy American instead, supporting local jobs at a higher price. The goal is to incentivize consumers to choose domestically produced goods, theoretically boosting the American economy. A few years ago, the Trump administration got very enthusiastic about tariffs, wielding them as a key tool in their trade strategy. Not just on toasters or blenders or microwaves, but on steel and aluminum, the backbone of everything from cars to cans. These are fundamental materials that underpin countless industries. The logic: protect American jobs from foreign competition, shield domestic industries from cheaper imports, ensuring the survival and growth of American manufacturing. The reality: in a global economy, America first can mean higher costs for everyone. The interconnectedness of global supply chains means that tariffs can have unintended and far-reaching consequences. Enter Ford, the iconic American car maker, a symbol of American ingenuity and manufacturing prowess. To build cars, Ford needs mountains of steel and aluminum. These raw materials are the lifeblood of their production process. When tariffs made those materials pricier, significantly increasing their cost, it was like telling a baker that flour now costs as much as gold. An absurd and crippling scenario for any business. Suddenly, Ford's costs soared, impacting their bottom line and overall profitability. And so did the price of your next car. The increased manufacturing costs are inevitably passed on to the consumer. This isn't just about numbers. It's not just abstract economic theory. It's about how a simple tax on imports collided with the messy reality of modern industry, a complex web of interconnected supply chains and global dependencies. Buckle up, this ride gets bumpy, because the story of tariffs is far from over, and the implications are still unfolding. Why all the tariffs? The official story: protect national security and fight unfair trade. The claim: cheap imports, especially from China, threatened America's ability to make things like tanks and ships. So, slap tariffs on steel and aluminum. Problem solved, right? Not quite. The tariffs hit not just China but allies like Canada and the EU, America's main metal suppliers. Retaliation followed. Other countries taxed American goods like motorcycles and bourbon. Economists warned. Tariffs would raise costs for American businesses and consumers, without bringing back many jobs. In a world where a Ford is built from parts sourced globally, taxing one link in the chain sends shockwaves through the whole system. For Ford, a company synonymous with American manufacturing, tariffs weren't just another headline in the business section. They weren't abstract economic theories debated in boardrooms. They represented a tangible billion-dollar punch directly to the gut of their operations, impacting everything from production costs to long-term investment strategies. It was a financial blow that resonated throughout the entire organization. CEO Jim Hackett, in no uncertain terms, stated that tariffs cost Ford a staggering $1 billion in profit in a single year. This wasn't a projected loss or a potential risk, it was a real, concrete reduction in their bottom line. Ford, like many American automakers, mostly buys American steel, supporting domestic jobs and industries. They have a long history of sourcing materials locally. But the unintended consequence of tariffs on imported steel was that domestic producers, facing less competition, also raised their prices. The cost of raw materials began to creep upwards. Suddenly, Ford found itself in the position of paying significantly more for American steel, the very thing the tariffs were supposed to promote. This increase was a direct result of a policy ostensibly designed to help American industry thrive and become more competitive on the global stage. That billion-dollar hit wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It forced Ford to meticulously rethink every investment decision, scrutinizing every project and expenditure. From ambitious electric vehicle programs aimed at future-proofing the company, to essential factory upgrades designed to improve efficiency and productivity, everything was on the table. The tariffs, initially intended to strengthen the American steel industry and boost the national economy, inadvertently made Ford, an iconic American company, less competitive in the increasingly global automotive market. Ford's leaders, recognizing the severity of the situation, publicly spoke out, expressing their concerns and highlighting the detrimental effects of the tariffs. They issued a stark warning, emphasizing that American steel, once competitively priced, was now among the most expensive in the world, putting them at a distinct disadvantage. Their message was clear and direct. You can't intentionally set the kitchen on fire, creating chaos and destruction, simply to prove a point about the importance of fire safety and preventative measures. The cure shouldn't be worse than the disease. But despite these warnings and the clear evidence of negative consequences, policymakers, it seemed, weren't listening, or at least weren't acting on the information. The unfortunate result was a flagship American company, a symbol of national pride and industrial might, hobbled and hindered by the very policy that was intended to save and strengthen it. The pain didn't stop at Ford's headquarters. It rippled through every part and supplier, a domino effect felt across the entire automotive industry. The impact was immediate and far-reaching, disrupting carefully orchestrated supply chains that had been decades in the making. A car is 30,000 parts, a complex symphony of components working in harmony. Each piece, from the smallest screw to the largest panel, plays a crucial role in the vehicle's overall function and safety. Many of these parts are made of steel or aluminum, essential materials that form the backbone of the automotive industry. These metals provide the strength, durability, and safety that consumers demand in their vehicles. When metal prices jump, so does the cost of every bolt and bracket, every nut and washer. These seemingly insignificant components add up, and a sudden price increase can have a significant impact on the overall cost of production. Ford's supply chain was thrown into chaos. The carefully calibrated system of just-in-time delivery, designed to minimize inventory costs, was suddenly disrupted. Factories faced shortages, production lines slowed, and delivery schedules were thrown into disarray. Suppliers raised prices, and Ford had to choose, absorb the cost or pass it to buyers. It was a difficult decision with no easy answers. Absorbing the cost would eat into profits, while passing it on to consumers could hurt sales. The uncertainty made long-term planning impossible. How could Ford invest in new models or expand production when the cost of raw materials was constantly fluctuating? The future was murky, and every decision felt like a gamble. Would tariffs last? Would they get worse? No one knew. The lack of clarity made it difficult for businesses to make informed decisions. They were operating in a fog of uncertainty, unsure of what the future held. Ford canceled plans to import the Focus Active from China. The tariffs made it unprofitable. The economics simply didn't work. The added cost of the tariffs erased any potential profit margin, making the import venture unsustainable. Some cheered, thinking it would mean more American jobs, a boost to the domestic manufacturing sector. The hope was that Ford would shift production to the United States, creating new employment opportunities for American workers. In reality, Ford had no plans to build that car in the US. The decision wasn't about bringing jobs home, it was purely a matter of economics. The company simply scrapped the model altogether. The result? Fewer choices for consumers, a shrinking selection of vehicles available at dealerships. Customers were left with fewer options to suit their needs and preferences. Lost opportunities for Ford, a setback in their efforts to innovate and expand their product line. The cancellation of the Focus Active represented a missed chance to compete in a growing market segment, and a chill on investment, a reluctance to commit capital to new projects in the face of so much uncertainty. Businesses hesitated to invest in expansion or innovation, fearing that changing trade policies could undermine their investments. A policy meant to boost American manufacturing was making it riskier to build anything at all. The unintended consequences of the tariffs were undermining the very industries they were intended to protect. Irony meet reality. A stark reminder that even well-intentioned policies can have unforeseen and often detrimental effects. The tariffs' biggest promise? Jobs. The reality? Layoffs. Ford's billion-dollar loss led to a massive restructuring. Thousands of jobs cut, including 7,000 salaried positions in the US. These weren't just numbers. They were engineers, designers, and families suddenly facing unemployment. The pain spread beyond Ford. For every steel job saved, dozens in auto manufacturing were put at risk. Suppliers felt the squeeze, threatening jobs across the Midwest. In towns like Flat Rock, Michigan, the anxiety was real. Less spending, lower property values, and a community on edge. The promise of revitalized industry rang hollow as pink slips piled up. Instead of a jobs boom, the tariffs triggered a wave of uncertainty and loss. The policy meant to save American workers ended up hurting many more. The cost was measured in livelihoods, not just dollars. Ford's costs soared, jobs were cut, but who really paid? You did. Tariffs on steel and aluminum became a hidden tax on every new car. Studies showed the average US-built vehicle cost $250, $300 more. For families on a budget, that's a big deal, and it pushed some buyers out of the market. Higher prices meant fewer sales, which meant more pressure on car companies to cut costs, fueling a vicious cycle. Even used cars got pricier as demand shifted. Whether you wanted a new Explorer or a used Fiesta, you paid more. The shock wasn't just in Ford's boardroom, it hit families at dealerships nationwide. America First ended up making American cars harder to afford. Ford's struggles weren't just corporate, they hit entire communities. One plant supports a web of suppliers, diners, and local shops. When Ford hurt, everyone felt it. Suppliers, often small businesses, faced impossible choices: absorb higher costs or lay off workers. Some closed for good, leaving towns with fewer jobs and shrinking tax bases. The pain was personal. Generations of workers saw their way of life erode. Local services suffered, businesses closed, and for sale signs multiplied. The optimism of a manufacturing revival faded, replaced by anxiety and loss. The real cost of tariffs was measured in empty pockets and shuttered doors. As the fallout spread, confusion and anger grew. The promised manufacturing boom vanished, replaced by headlines about layoffs and rising prices. Even supporters of the policy began to question it as companies like Ford and Harley-Davidson announced job cuts or moved production. Lawmakers from both parties started pushing back, hearing from constituents hit hard by the trade war. The official narrative cracked as real-world data overwhelmed the rhetoric. The country was split. Some insisted it was temporary pain, others saw only damage. The realization set in. The plan had gone badly off script. What's the legacy of the Ford tariff saga? Economic patriotism is far messier than it sounds. You can't wall off your economy. Modern industry is a global web. Tariffs meant to help can backfire, hurting the very companies and workers they're supposed to protect. Ford and others learned to diversify suppliers and build resilience, not just bring everything home. For workers, the lesson is sobering. Jobs can be pawns in political games, and promises don't always match reality. The future depends on smart investment and targeted policy, not blunt instruments. The Ford story is a warning light. Tough talk isn't a substitute for understanding how the world works. The real question, will we learn, or hit the same pothole again?